Do you have any advice on how to vet a potential marriage partner during the dating relationship phase? God, that's a hard question. Okay, so well, I can tell you what I've observed as a consequence of watching, all the married people, successful and unsuccessful, who I know, but also watching all my clients and giving this a fair bit of thought. Here's some of what's necessary for a successful marriage. You have to trust the person. That doesn't mean they can't make mistakes, because you're going to make mistakes and so are they. But fundamentally, you have to trust them. And what that means is that you have to trust that if things go wrong, if they make a mistake, they'll do what was necessary in conjunction with you to set it right. You have to be able to negotiate with the person. And those two things are tied very, very close together. So if you guys have to be able to have a conversation about what it is that you want to do, come to a conclusion, moderate your differences, move forward and have that work. You have to be able to fight and make up. Both of those. If you can't fight with your potential marriage partner, then you're not communicating, because there's just no bloody way that you're going to get along. There's no way you're going to agree on everything. That's just not going to happen. So you have to be honest with one another enough to have some conflict, but then you have to be able to make up. That's a huge deal, man, because, well, then you get to have conflict and solve problems and make up. So trust, negotiation, conflict resolution. The next thing I would say is, it's kind of nice if you're attracted to each other. If there's a strong sexual attraction there, it isn't obvious to me that that's something that can be conjured up if it doesn't exist. I haven't seen that happen successfully. That seems to depend on factors that aren't really under voluntary control. Obviously people can modify themselves to some degree to be more or less attractive, staying in physical shape and that sort of thing, dressing nicely and having a certain amount of sex appeal and charisma and provocativeness. That's all there, but that's all well and good, and it's important. But I do believe that spark that's outside of voluntary control is a necessary precondition for a long-lasting relationship. I do believe, though, that if it's there, you still have to work very hard to maintain it, as hard in your marriage as you would when you're dating, and you need to know that. It's also helpful if you actually like the person, if they're your friend, that you actually like to go do things with them, sort of independent of the romantic element. You don't need to want to do everything together, but you should have some things that you like to do in common. So some similarity in personality is useful. The personality scale is useful for that. Like, look, here, it's really hard for an extreme extrovert and an extreme introvert to live together, because the extreme extrovert wants to be with people all the time, and the extreme introvert is immediately exhausted by that. And neither of those things are precisely under voluntary control. It's really hard for someone super agreeable and super disagreeable to get along together, because the agreeable person isn't going to be able to stand up very well to the disagreeable person. And the disagreeable person is going to think that the agreeable person is a pushover. That's rough. It's very hard for someone high in openness and someone very low in openness to be together, because the open person is like fascinated by ideas and really interested in aesthetics and art and philosophy and poetry and all of that. And the person who's low in openness, it's like they're colorblind to that. It's not in their realm of involuntary interest. Conscientiousness, the same thing. If you're a very conscientious person, very diligent, nose to the grindstone, industrious and orderly, and your partner can while away the time with no problem whatsoever and doesn't mind a mess and disorder, then that's the conscientious person is going to think that the unconscientious person is useless, and the unconscientious person is going to think that the conscientious person is an uptight tyrant. And that's very, very hard to overcome. It's like a fatal flaw. So those extreme personality differences across more than one or two traits is going to make your relationship extraordinarily difficult. So the only place where that might be different is that, you know, you probably don't want to both be high in neuroticism. So like if one of you is high in neuroticism and the other isn't, that's kind of a nice balance, because one of you will be a little alert to threat and the other one will calm the one who's alert to threat down. If you're both low in neuroticism, well, then that's not going to be too much of a problem, although you might be a little bit less risk averse than you should be. But mostly you want a fair bit of similarity in terms of personality. Then I guess the other thing is that, well, do you have something like a shared vision of the future? You know, like how are you going to mediate the inevitable conflict between whose career takes priority? And what about kids? Do you both want kids? And if you do want kids, when do you want them? And how many do you want? And what's your sense about who's responsible for what when with regards to the kids? And the same when you're running a household. It's like, do you have some sense of, do you have enough shared beliefs so that running a household together is something that is with a peaceful household and a productive household is within the realm of possibility? So that's what it looks like to me. So that's a lot of things. So